Welcome to Nightmares and Grief, a place to explore and celebrate the darkness. Each episode, I'll read stories written by me, Derek Heisey. So settle in, check under the bed, and pour a drink for the skeletons in your closet. It's time to start.
I used to be a teacher, but I hated it. It wasn't the kids. The kids are great. It was the adults. Adults are terrible. So I quit. When I told my aging father, he said, "But you're so good at it." In his mind, when you're good at something, that's a sign from God that you should continue doing it. I worked at Costco because that's the best I could do. Teachers get pigeonholed to teach. Nobody wants to hire a teacher. Everyone says they love teachers until they have to interact with them. So I stocked shelves in the morning shift. Then the revolution came, promising to finally institutionalize truth and bring us back to a time of order, and I was drafted. Working for the Defense Corps was simple work. Routine. Thoughtless. Drill, drill, drill. I was very good at it. So good that it only took a few years before I got my big promotion. Due to your stunning performance and background in education, the letter said, you have been assigned to the Department for Redirection and Reeducation. I was worried at first. Were they going to put me in a classroom with a bunch of ill-thinking adults? In a sense, yes. My first day, they brought me to one of the detention centers into a cold concrete hall. They brought me to a cell. Inside the cell was a man tied to a chair. Beside the man was a table and a metal folding chair. The table was covered with various vicious-looking instruments. I asked the guard what I was supposed to do. Teach him, he said gruffly. Re-educate him. Then he left me alone with the man. My hands shook. I studied the man with a wary gaze. He leaned forward against his bonds, hanging limply in the chair, eyes burning holes into the dirty concrete floor. I glanced at the table. Pliers, a scalpel, a ball-peen hammer, a cattle prod, all worn, rusted, dirty, and well used. But on the far wall was mounted a chalkboard. With my mouth hot and saliva viscous, I wiped sweat off my brow. I said hello to the prisoner. I introduced myself as John Stowe. The man remained motionless. He didn't say a word. So I went to the chalkboard. Old habits. The chalk stuck to my sweaty fingers as I gave a lecture. I explained the conditions leading to the upheaval, the necessity of the revolution, and the failures of the old world's institutions. I explained how democracy had been a failed experiment, rotten from the inside, how freedom had become an abused decadence, and how truth was irrelevant in the 21st century. My voice trembled at first, but I found my rhythm. Structure. I drew timelines, made a list of key terms, drew a mind map to illustrate the connection between ideas. I wished I had more colors of chalk. It felt good. But then the man laughed. I stopped, turning around slowly. The man was still staring at the floor, and he was still laughing that dry, raspy chuckle. At last, he spoke. You think this is a classroom, Mr. Stowe? My mouth flapped wordlessly. The man raised his face to meet me. It was filthy. One eye was purple and nearly swollen shut. A thin cut caked with old blood on his cheek. Stubble darkened his jaw like a midnight shadow. He leaned over and spat. "Fuck you and all the rest of you," he said. "You're wasting your time." It took me a minute, sweating and stammering, to recover, but eventually I turned back to the board and resumed. The click-clack-clock of the chalk on the board filled the small, dirty cell. It was the only sound I heard for the rest of the session. Eventually, the door opened and the guard beckoned for me. He did not look pleased. The man in the chair said, "You're in trouble now, Mr. Stowe." In the hall, a clean man in a sharp-pressed uniform met me. Even in the dim light of the prison, his medals gleamed like coins at the bottom of a well. He said, "You're taking re-education too literally. Did the chalkboard confuse you?" I told him I was only trying to teach the man the errors in his thinking. The man with the medal said, "These people don't listen to logic. If they did, they'd be more like you." He reached out and brushed chalk dust off my shoulder. "Now," he said, gesturing to the door, "I provided you with tools. Call them your curriculum." He straightened and looked down his nose at me. "Use it," he concluded. My mouth went dry. I nodded feverishly. I went back to the cell, determined to succeed. I knew the price of failure. The man inside the cell shook his head and chuckled at my return. "Back again, Mr. Stowe?" I lingered over the table, hand hovering over the curriculum I'd been given. I licked my lips. I picked up the hammer. "Do it," I told myself. "Do it before you can think about it." With long strides, I closed the distance between me and the man in the chair. "What do you think you're even going to do with it?" I slammed the peen against the middle knuckle of his right hand. The man in the chair threw back his head and screamed. I explained to him that the revolution was necessary. He said, "Fuck you." I tried to hit each of his other knuckles, but I missed and hit the middle one a second time. The bone cracked wetly against the round metal of the hammer. A fleck of blood spurted onto my cheek. I didn't bother wiping it off. The man in the chair warbled a scream. Rage flared in my chest. I slapped him, grabbing hold of his hair and pulling his head back. I traced his throat with the head of the hammer, drawing a line of blood down the flesh. His Adam's apple bobbed back and forth beneath the metal. I told him that the state of the country before the revolution was deplorable. People like him who stood in the way of progress deserved to be hanged, and if it were up to me, worse would happen. I didn't give him a chance to respond. I just started working on the other hand. I continued, explaining that even if he didn't see the benefits, the majority of the country did, and that anyone who stands in the way of the majority is a danger to stability, to order, and most importantly, to peace. Peace should be protected at any cost. I was panting, but the words were coming easily now. I spun the hammer in my hand. I understood this curriculum now. I slammed the hammer against the back of his hand. I told him there were so many precepts to learn and so many bones to break. The phrase surprised me, but there it was. I told him that rebellion was selfish. Dissent was decay. Truth could no longer be a matter of perception. It must be institutional, enforceable, and measurable. By the time I started working on his shoulder, I couldn't hear his weeping over the sound of my own voice. The arm hung like a dead snake from his body, wet and floppy and rubbery. I didn't wait for him to speak anymore. I merely lectured at him. Everything I'd learned in Defense Corps, all the facts I'd absorbed flowed through me. I was a vessel for the correct ideology. I don't know how long our lesson lasted, but I had to stop because I was tired. The man in the chair didn't have the strength to weep louder than a whisper. Snot and blood dribbled down his face. His teeth formed a broken silhouette that reminded me of jagged mountain ranges. His hands were soaked in blood. My arms were soaked in blood. My uniform was soaked in blood. I set the hammer down on the table and picked up a handkerchief that had so generously been included. I wiped off my hands and face. I told him to rest up. We had more learning to do tomorrow. I leaned fully into the curriculum. Every student who left my classroom did so transformed. I had a regression rate of less than 4%. They brought me every regressed student for detention, and they got special lessons. As time passed, I got promoted again. The same man with the shiny medals asked me to write a new curriculum. He explained, "The program is new, but you're a shining model. We want you to teach others to be as effective as you." I told him I didn't want to leave the classroom. He continued that I didn't have to. Think of it as summer vacation, he said. Prepare for the next year of students. You deserve a break. So I did as I was told. They put me up in a beautiful apartment overlooking the sea and provided me with every modern convenience and more. But I encountered the same problem I had before the revolution. I had to provide weekly reports, drafts, paperwork, administrative tedium. None of it felt like it was relevant to my calling, to what they had hired me for in the first place. I longed for my students. When I finally returned, the guard smiled brightly at me. "Welcome back," he chirped. "We've got something special for you." I wondered if they'd already implemented the changes in my curriculum, provided me with the tools that I needed. My heart raced with excitement, but when I opened the door, there sat a man, tied to a chair, beside a table lined with implements. Behind me, the guard said, "Say hello to P19845. I didn't understand until he raised his head. Shock bolted across his face. "Mr. Stowe?" he asked. My eyes narrowed. Then I made the connection. 12th grade honors language arts. Simon Brecker. A good student. Smart, quiet. He always turned in his essays early. His handwriting was immaculate. Simon stammered, "Mr. Stowe, it's me, Simon, remember? I sat in the third row and wrote about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. What are you doing here?" I picked up the needle-nose pliers and a razor blade. I asked him what his name was. "What are you talking about, Mr. Stowe? You've got to remember me. I am Simon Brecker. You were my favorite teacher." I shake my head. I tell him he's wrong. That's not his name. Confused horror crossed his face. What do you mean? I can know my own name. I know my own name. God damn it! Has there been a mistake? Who the fuck do you people think I am? I stretched his earlobe tight with the pliers. I sliced it off with the blade. I tell him that he's P19845. Simon Brecker is dead. Blood streams down his neck and soaks his jumpsuit. His mouth opens for a scream that would have broken my heart a long time ago, but right now he's a student who needs redirection. I say it again, quietly reasserting that he's P19845. I ask him to repeat it for me. My name is Simon Brecker, he roars. I'm Simon fucking Brecker. I go to the other ear. I stretch. I slice. I tell him that names are privileges granted by the state for the purposes of identification. Sentimentality and memory have nothing to do with them. Identity, I explain, is earned through obedience, and he has not yet earned his. He writhes, blood painting his collarbones like a wet necklace. P19845 tries to speak again, but the pain drowns out his sense. He can only manage to sputter out an incoherent string of nonsense. I tell him that his diction needs work. I take the pliers to his pinky nail and yank. I let the nail fall to the floor. Once more, I ask him to say his name. Simon fucking Brecker. I sigh and pull out the nail of his ring finger. By the time I leave the fingers on his left hand, mangled and bloody, he no longer speaks. We've barely begun the lesson and he's already zoning off. That's unacceptable. I grab the cattle prod. It wakes him up. I tell him we'll repeat the lesson until it's learned. I'm willing to meet him where he is, I explain, but he has to help me understand why he doesn't understand the concepts I've presented. It's okay if he doesn't know what he doesn't know, but he needs to try, to really try so that I can help him. He groans, his head rolling on his blood-soaked shoulders. I jolt him again, longer this time. I smell cooking flesh. I tell him that he is P19845. I tell him to say it back. He replies with defiance. We continue like this for hours. It's the longest lesson I've ever taught. I'm disappointed with his obstinacy. He'd always been such a good student. When his nails are gone, his right hand missing, the wound cauterized, with his head shaved and half of his teeth gone, I ask him once more what his name is. P19845 doesn't speak. He hasn't even screamed since I broke his left arm with a hammer. But he needs to say it. In order for the lesson to be internalized, he must say it. I crouch beside him and put a gentle hand to his cheek. I ask him to say his name. His one remaining eye twitches. His head lolls back on his shoulders. A string of blood intertwined with drool drips from his split lips. I sigh and make to stand up. I hear a voice. P19845 tries to speak. I encourage him, telling him he's doing good. He's doing a good job. We're almost done, I say. He just has to say it. He breathes through his nose, slow and shallow. He says, P19845. The words were barely recognizable. I'd done my best to leave his tongue and front teeth intact for just this moment, but he'd said it. I was so proud. I stood up, retrieved the handkerchief from the table, and wiped off his face. I told him he did a good job. The following morning, I was called to the commandant's office. The man with the medals, he wore more now than ever, sat waiting behind his desk. He didn't rise. He only gestured to the chair. He said, "You're making history. You and your students are a tribute to all the work we're doing." I thanked him. He said that he wanted me to scale my efforts, train others, share my methodology. I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. He said, "I understand you believe your place is in the classroom, but I want you to realize that you're the best we've ever had at this. You have a gift. Gifts should be shared." I thought of my father. I thought of my purpose. I nodded. I agreed. My new classroom was bright, sterile. The skeletal fingers of fluorescent tubes scared away the shadows from every corner. 9 recruits sat before me in 3 rows of 3. Fresh uniforms, clean notebooks, hungry eyes. I opened the bag on my desk. I removed a ball-peen hammer. Then, on the chalkboard, I wrote, "Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire." They'd learn quickly. The best ones always do. A long time later, I requested to check in on one of my earlier students. I told them I wanted to conduct a long-term progress assessment. They approved my visit. He was kept in a special wing, heavily sedated most days. They allowed me 15 minutes of contact. He was thinner now, gray at the temples. His jumpsuit hung off his shoulders like a waterfall of fabric. His fingers of his remaining hand curled into a claw. The bones never reset properly. He didn't recognize me. I'm not sure he recognized anything anymore. I reached across the table for him. I told him that he'd come a long way. Some of us learn slower than others, and that's okay. I told him he'd done a good job. His single eye fluttered. He gazed at everything and nothing. P19845, he said. I smiled. I congratulated him. My father was right. I'm a teacher. I'll always be a teacher. And I'm very good at my job.
Thank you for sharing my nightmares and helping me carry the grief. If you enjoyed the story, please share your favorite nightmare with a friend or family member, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. If you want to go deeper, ever wondered what your favorite story reveals about your psychology? I offer story shadow readings where I analyze what your chosen narrative says about your inner patterns and growth edges. I also do psychological tarot readings focused on shadow work and pattern recognition rather than predictions. Links to both services are in the description if you're curious about what insights might emerge. For ongoing support, you can find me on Patreon or buy my books on Amazon. I've linked to both in the description. You can connect with me on Instagram or Threads at Nightmares and Grief. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Good night.